Hello everyone, this is Obscure Nick here with a new video today. We are going to talk about and respond to Dan Schneider's response to the Quiet on Set documentary, which is about all the allegations regarding the dark side of kids' TV and stuff specifically that went on the set of his shows. So, as you know, let's deep dive and thrive. So, as many of you know, Dan Schneider is a kids TV producer. He also did some adult shows like What I Like About You, but mainly he's done iCarly, Victorious, All That, Kenan and Kel, The Amanda Show. So many kids shows, so many of your favorite 2000s kids shows. And recently there's been a documentary called The Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV that recently released this past week. And it's a 4-episode documentary, which I recommend you go check on the Investigation Discovery Network or HBO Max. You can find it on either or. And there have been a lot of things that have come out from that documentary. Now, I would like to react and respond and review that, and we're gonna pick that documentary apart on this channel. I have been doing so on Twitter, but we are going to talk about it on this channel as well, and as well on my Patreon page. We're gonna go even further there. But today, I would like to start, before we go into the documentary itself, to talk about Dan Schneider finally responding to everything that's been going on. This is his first time, like, truthfully responding. Well, not truthfully. There's not a lot of truth to this response, and we're going to dissect that apart today. But you know, he's on video, he's talking about certain situations that happen, but not everything. And you're gonna see that. We're gonna pick it apart. This video is 20 minutes.
Hey, it's Boogie. I played T-Bo on Nickelodeon's iCarly. I got a chance to watch the Quiet on Set program, and I reached out to Dan to see if it was something that he'd be willing to discuss. I'm pleased to say that he said yes. Dan, how are you?
Okay, first off, it's already shady that he has one of his actors in this video. Like, it's one of his actors who is more of a recurring / background character conducting this interview. And did he really reach out to Dan, or what's the situation behind this interview, and where is this interview exactly? It's giving like even just the set of this interview is giving like it looks like Sam and Cat. Like, it looks like one of his shows, to be quite honest with you. Okay, let's keep going.
I'm okay. I really appreciate you reaching out and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about what we saw over the last 2 nights.
I'm really glad you're here because I believe this is important.
For sure.
We've got a lot of things to unpack. But before I dive into my list of topics that I'd like to discuss, is there anything you'd like to start off with?
Absolutely. Watching over the past 2 nights was very difficult. Me facing my past behaviors, some of which are embarrassing and that I regret. And I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology.
I feel like you've had your chance to apologize, and it's been like 20 years for some of this, 10, 20, 17, 30 years to apologize. So why not do that? Let's see if he lists names. Let's just see that.
Let's talk about the massages.
Okay.
Watching the content yesterday, it was disturbing.
It was wrong. It was wrong that I ever put anybody in that position. It was the wrong thing to do. I'd never do it today. I'm embarrassed that I did it then. I apologize to anybody that I ever put in that situation. And even additionally, I apologize to the people who were walking around Video Village or wherever they happened, because there were lots of people there who witnessed it who also may have felt uncomfortable. So I owe them an apology as well.
Yeah. Dan, talk to me about the writer's room.
Okay, so I'm glad he said it was wrong. It is wrong. And it's a form of sexual harassment.
From what I saw, not cool.
No, and I don't mean to cut you off, but if I can cut right to the chase, let me just say, no writer should ever feel uncomfortable in any writer's room, ever, period, the end, no excuses. Most TV writers, comedy writers have been in writers' rooms, and they are aware that a lot of times there are inappropriate jokes made and inappropriate topics come up. But the fact that I participated in that, especially when I was leading the room, it embarrasses me. I shouldn't have done it. And I can tell you why it hurts really bad for me. I remember very clearly my early experiences, my first experiences in the entertainment business. I was green, I was scared, I was excited. It meant the world to me that I was getting those opportunities. And I went in and I got lucky because they were great. My first couple of experiences were fantastic. And the fact that I didn't pay that forward to every employee that walked through my door, it hurts my heart, because I should have. And I wish I could go back and fix that. In the writer's room, there's no doubt that sometimes those jokes went beyond the pale, and I said things that went too far, or made practical jokes that went too far, and that was wrong. And that was because, I was an inexperienced.
Okay, so you notice how he's like, let's just cut to the chase here. That gives me indication that this interview's on his own terms. It's and there's a reason why he didn't do Quiet on Set, because if he really didn't have something to hide, why didn't he do Quiet on Set? Why didn't he do this in Quiet on Set? Why didn't, the only thing we saw from him in Quiet on Set was him on like cards responding to certain things. That's literally it. And it's fact here that he was contacted for Quiet on Set. However, he did not want to participate in it. He only participated with those cue cards just to scratch off certain things that we saw. Those black cards with like, Dan denies this, that, and the third. Why didn't he just do this with Quiet on Set? See, he wanted an interview on his own terms. He wanted it on his own terms, where he felt comfortable and cushy, where there's no real pushback, because there is really no pushback here. Boogie is just get there for a paycheck, truthfully. He's just reading off these clearly printed cards beforehand of questions. Dan called him up and was like, and we know why he called him up, because there was a lot of racial things, racial inequality. I don't know if I can say racism on YouTube, but there was a lot of exposing of racism within the production of these shows. There's a lot of hidden racism in these shows. Like the kid covered in peanut butter, the black kid, shirtless, covered in peanut butter. And always having the black kid being like the DRUG dealer. Like, that's very stereotypical. The way he portrayed people of color in these shows, did you always notice that they were always like very like bubbly and airhead type of characters, which is an indication to racism to Black people specifically way back when. And there's a whole history on that. We could really dive into that. I have a specific example of a racist cartoon from the 1940s that depicts exactly what the mirror shows in a lot of Dan shows with the token Black character. And that's why Boogie's there. That is why Boogie's there. And then also on top of that, he's just generalizing it. He's not picking the part that spoke the most about Jenny Kilgren, one of the female writers on the Amanda Show, when Dan whispered to her, "Don't tell anyone I meant Penelope taint as an inappropriate thing, but I know what it truthfully means." Like, he said something like that he knows what it means, and I always thought it was Penelope Tate, not taint. Look up the word, what taint means. I don't want to explain that on my channel, but I'd never even caught that myself. And I've been deep diving into these topics for years with these shows. Like, wow, my God. So he's just very making himself the victim is what I'm noticing. There's a lot of framing of that. There's too much of that, actually. Let's continue.
Producer, I was immature, wouldn't happen today, but I'm just really sorry it happened.
Yeah. Now, we know you've had a lot of success over 2 decades. Thousands of people have worked with you, for you.
Okay.
Let's speak directly to the people who did not have a good experience with you.
Okay, I would like to speak to those people because I hate that anybody worked for me and didn't have a good time. You know me, you've been on my sets. Look, I've had some employees that have worked for me for 10 years, some more than 20 years, who would work with me again, but not everybody. There's still a significant number that didn't have a great time working for me, so my batting average isn't nearly high enough in that area. And the way they wouldn't get the best of me is that I would let the pressure of doing 40 or even more episodes per year, I would let that pressure get to me, which a good boss should never, ever do.
Was there specific things that you were doing?
Sure. I would snap at people sometimes. Mm-hmm. I would be snarky when I could have given them a nicer answer. I would not give people the time that they needed. I would be in too big a hurry to get on to the next thing I had to do. And watching that show, it made me, there were so many times I wanted to pick up a phone and call some of those people and say, "I'm so sorry, and let's talk about it. And I wish you'd had a better time, and I wish I could have shown you a better experience."
Yeah.
So why don't you call them up? Why don't we call them up? And why don't we call, instead of some of the people, let's name names. Name the names. Name the names. Like, that's all it is. Alexa Nicholas. Giovanni Samuels. Brian Hearns, I'm sorry. Alexa Nicholas, I'm sorry. Giovanni Samuels, I'm sorry. Raquel Lee, I'm sorry. Angelique Bates, I'm sorry. Chrissy Stratton, I'm sorry. And so on and so on. And even to the parents, Tracy Brown, I'm sorry. Even Virgil Fabian, I'm sorry. Like, I don't like that he's just generalizing of some people. Let's talk about specific things. If you're going to make an apology, address everything specifically. Name the names. Just say the names. Say the names. That's more meaningful. And also, don't do the apology like Alexa Nicholas said. Remember when Alexa Nicholas said that Dan's lawyer called her in 2019 after she spoke up about her traumatic experience with Nickelodeon on the Zoe 101 set? Remember that? Remember when his way of, intimidating Alexa with his lawyer? Like, he used his lawyer to contact Alexa. He didn't contact Alexa himself. He used his lawyer. If you are truly sorry, Dan, you will call these people up, not with a lawyer, because that already looks intimidating. That looks like you're about to, shut them up. That looks like you're about to push an NDA. Let's not do that. That is not the framework this needs to be put in.
Now, you've written hundreds of episodes. Thousands of jokes have been told.
Yeah.
But currently, where we are, some people think that some of those jokes are inappropriate for children. Mm-hmm. What do you think of that?
All these jokes that you're speaking of, that the show covered over the past 2 nights, every one of those jokes was written for a kid audience because kids thought they were funny and only funny, okay? Now we have some adults looking back at them 20 years later through their lens, and they're looking at them and they're saying, oh, I don't think that's appropriate for a kid's show. Mm-hmm. And I have no problem with that. If that's how anyone feels, let's cut those jokes out of the show. Just like I would have done 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I cut it. I want my shows to be popular. I want everyone to like. The more people who like the shows, the happier I am. Yeah. So if there's anything in a show that needs to be cut because it's upsetting somebody, let's cut it.
So I think it's big for you to say with your work, if it's viewed as that today, you don't have a problem.
Cut it. Cut it.
I mean, that's a solution.
But here's the thing. When people spoke up 20 years ago, and I'm speaking specifically to Tracy Brown's experience, when she said the parent on set, when she said thought something was very inappropriate for her son, Brian Hearns, her son got fired. Her son got fired. Nothing was cut. Her son just got fired. When Alexa spoke out on the set of Zoe 101, and she got ostracized by everyone in that whole environment, and she felt alienated from everyone because she spoke out about injustice things on set. So whenever there was a situation with your feet getting held to the fire on your productions, you didn't cut it. You kept going with it. You would cut the people out that were complaining. You thought the people were the problem. You never took some self-awareness here that your content could be the problem. Again, the Penelope Taint situation kind of speaks volumes with that writer that spoke up and said that, yes, he was sexualizing Penelope Taint. That spoke volumes. That said a lot. Okay, let's keep going.
The last thing I want to ever do is put any content in a show that's going to upset my audience and make them want to turn off the TV. Why would I ever want to do that?
That makes sense. I want to give you an opportunity to kind of elaborate on something.
Okay.
The thought process from the series is you had the power to just write a joke, and no matter what, it's going on TV. You just had that type of power. Is that true?
The notion that I had the power to just produce whatever I wanted and have it air is completely false.
Okay.
There were many, many levels of scrutiny. Okay? We had executives in LA. We had executives in New York.
So two coasts.
Two coasts of approval, yes. And by the way, approval at every stage, really. Okay. And I'm talking about wardrobe. I'm talking about makeup, sound, sets, dialogue, jokes, everything.
Now, when you say approval, these obviously that's a hierarchy, not your colleagues or people in the room. Okay.
No, not my colleagues. No, these are my bosses. Bosses, and then their bosses, and then their bosses. And they're approving all of this stuff. Okay. Okay? And we're also shooting it in front of all sorts of adults and caregivers and the set teacher and the families. Everybody's watching it.
Okay, something I have to say that he's confirming to us here that I do think is true is that Nickelodeon did approve of all of this. Nickelodeon did approve of all this content. And they could have just been like, they could have pulled the plug on this. But they kept going with it because the ratings were working with this. As well, the people that work there clearly have the higher ups. There's something there. There's something there with the higher ups. But we know who the higher ups are. Russell Hicks, Brian Robbins, and there's even higher ups. I don't want to get into the higher ups, but they were all in on it. They were in on it. And I feel like in this, he's pushing it on the network. He's blaming the network to save himself here. But which I do agree that a big portion of this is on the network. It is on the network. They did approve of all this. They let him do whatever he wants, really, on these shows, and we all saw it. However, he needs to take some accountability that on his shows, they're not always appropriate. You're doing child porn without, well, I don't want to say without realizing. He was intentional with what he knew what these jokes were. And he told the female writer that he knew what these jokes were. He knew. But it is child porn. It's a version of that. It's in that realm, whether he realizes it fully or not. And I honestly didn't realize that until I became an adult. Really, I didn't realize this until you see this with adult eyes. And looking back, especially at those on-air dare things, those things are just. There was one on-air dare here, and we're talking about all that on my channel. I am getting through the second season, but we are getting through. But when we get to like season 7, 8, we'll definitely we'll do a retrospective on air dares in depth. But there is one of Kyle Sullivan in a diaper. Like, he's just in a diaper and that's it. Like, why is there always like a sense of a sexual element to it? And then there's also one of Jack DeSena. He's in just with his shirt off in a bathtub of worms. And I'm like, why does he need to be shirtless? Like, he had pants on, but like, why did his shirt have to be taken off? And he's like 13 in this. And then there's Brian Hearns with his shirt off, getting peanut butter all over his body. But like, why couldn't it just been on his arm, even though I don't think this should have been done at all? And then also you notice on a lot of these that there's a lot of things with the toes, like the camera angles with the toes and stuff. He was very specific about that, and a lot of people said that in the documentary as well. He's really just generalizing what his work is. He's trying to get out of it, because if he admits to what it is, he'll end up looking really guilty for something. It will look really bad at that point. But here we are. So,
and if anybody had said anything, hey, we don't like that, that's not appropriate, then it would have been cut out.
Now, I'm gonna push back a little bit,
sure,
because the series painted you in this way that you were just the guy that was doing what he wanted, and people were afraid to confront you about things. So just humor me, say that was the case. What would have been the ultimate way to...
Okay, if nobody on the set, if all of the dozens and dozens of adults that were on the set, if they didn't say anything, if my bosses said, if they insisted, you got to make a change here, you got to cut that, I had to do it. I had no choice.
Got it.
No, you did have a choice, because Tracy Brown was said that this stuff was inappropriate on set. She said it on set, and then Brian Hearns got cut out of the scenes and then fired later. So that's invalid. That's actually invalid what you're saying there.
Now this next one,
and that was hardly a pushback.
It kind of hit close to home. Being a new father, I wouldn't be opposed to my child being in the entertainment industry.
That says a lot. That says everything I need to know about you, Boogie.
Doesn't matter what age, yeah? Seeing some of those on-air dares, seeing it now from where you are now in your life, what do you think of that?
I think that some of the on-air dares went too far. I think they pushed the envelope too far. Not all of them, not most of them, but some did. Nickelodeon wanted to do their version of Fear Factor. At the time we were shooting All That, so I was tasked with doing these on-air dares with the All That cast. So we get with the writers and we come up with all these ideas, and it's hard to do because we don't have the budget of Fear Factor, sure, and we can't put the kids in dangerous situations like the adults are put in. So it was hard to come up with stuff. But we would come up with all these ideas of dares they could do. We would give them to the network, and they would say, tell us the ones that were okay.
Right.
Those are the ones we shot. Those are the ones that aired. At the time, I had no indication that any kid ever had a problem with them. But when I was watching the show over the past 2 nights, I now know that there were kids who did have problems with the on-air dares. And it breaks my heart. And I'm so sorry. I am so sorry to any kid who ever had to do a dare or anything that they didn't want to do or weren't comfortable doing. We went out of our way to make sure they were safe and that everything was done properly. But if a kid was scared and didn't want to do it, kids shouldn't have had to do it.
Yeah.
Period, the end.
Right.
And if I had known at the time, I would have changed.
But, okay, first off, say the names of the kids. Brian Hearns, Giovanni Samuels. Brian Hearns, Giovanni Samuels, Cal Sullivan. Say the names. Say the names of which kids didn't like those. And also, there's footage of Brian Hearns saying he didn't like it. Like, he didn't like it.
I don't like this.
We can see the footage of it. We can see the footage of a few of them doing that. So, and which ones does he think went too far? Like, I'm just curious. See, he's generalizing it way too much. He needs to, if he's going to do this apology, he needs to exactly specify what he's apologizing for. This is just very general. He's making it about himself once again. He's not giving specifics. This is not helpful. This is not helpful.
Changed it on the spot.
Now, we also saw the series highlight two former writers' viewers, two women, who spoke about a wage discrepancy. Now, I know that you don't divvy out salaries. Talk to me about that part.
Well, you're correct. I have nothing to do with paying writers. I never have. I've never made a writer's deal. And of all the writers I've been in a writer's room with, I never even knew how much most of them were getting paid.
Yeah, but we saw these two women who were writers for you sharing one salary. How does that happen?
It's very simple. There's a common practice in television when hiring writers. If you have a spot for a new writer, sometimes you'll go to two writers and say, hey, if you two new writers for your first job are willing to share a salary, you can both have the job. They have the opportunity to say, yes, that sounds good, or no, no thank you. In this case, it was two women writers. I've done another show where that teaming was done with two male writers, and they split a salary. I did another show where it was a male and a female writer, and they split a salary. So,
And these are all first-time writers.
all first-time writers looking for their first gig.
Got it. Now, in the series,
I will say that I could see that as being true, especially for first-time writers. Is it right? No, not at all. I don't think that should be a thing.
they also highlighted two black actors who said that they felt overlooked. Now, I want to be clear. I'm never going to speak on anyone else's journey. Yeah, I can talk about my experience, how my experience was with you, what I saw prior to working with you. But again, I don't want to speak on anyone's journey. I saw you be honored for diversity in your work.
Boogie, I hope he paid you well. I really hope he paid you well. Allegedly, because we still have to say allegedly.
Yes, and the reason for that is diversity has always been very important to me in my shows. If you go back to the very first Nickelodeon show I ever made, that's very evident, as it is in the second one, and then the first movie I ever made for Nickelodeon, which starred Kenan and Kel, and every show I did after that had a lead black actor in it. I'm very proud of that. It's very important to me. And not only am I proud that they were in my shows, I'm exceptionally proud of the achievements they've had beyond my shows, and they've gone on to bigger and better things, and that gives me a great sense of pride.
The only actors of color that I'm aware of on his shows that had success in the industry was Kenan Thompson and Kel Mitchell. And I think Denzel Whitaker, and I think Leon Thomas has had some success in music. But other than that, I can't think of any, like, majority of the people of color had struggled in the industry afterwards. Have you heard Angelique Bates' story about that? About how a black actress who's a female struggled with her career afterwards because you, Dan, you and Nickelodeon blackballed her from her experience. You notice how it's mostly like people of color speaking up and women? That was a common theme. The only people that were outside of that was Virgil, Drake's dad, and Kyle Sullivan. But the rest was just women and people of color. Literally, that's what this. So there's a common theme there. There seems to be a pattern. There seems to be a pattern. If you truthfully celebrate diversity, it goes beyond just color.
Well, something that really kind of bothered me was how they depicted your relationship with the cast.
Yeah, it bothered me too.
Yeah, just me being there, I knew the dynamic was trust. I understood that in situations where they may have had turmoil, whether it be with their families, whether it be other castmates, they came to you. Versus how they made you look. With that said, Amanda Bynes was brought up in the series and her emancipation and how you were involved in that. Can you talk to us about it a bit?
Sure. Amanda was between the ages of 16 and 17, and she wanted to get emancipated from her parents, which was a fairly common thing with successful young actors, at least at the time.
Sure.
And she wanted that for herself. So she turned to her team, which included her lawyer, her agent, her manager, her publicist, me, because she included me as part of her team, thought of me that way. We supported her. She tried to get emancipated. It ended up not working out. She didn't.
Well, since we're here, let's stay here for a moment. There was also an incident where she had ran away from home, if
Yes.
you would. Can you talk to us a little bit just to clear the air of exactly what happened in that situation?
Yes. One night, it was very late, well after midnight, 1 or 2 in the morning. Phone rang. I answered. It was Amanda. She was upset. She was in distress. She had had some conflict with her parents, I think her father, and she called me. I was immediately concerned about her safety. I called someone who I knew was fairly nearby. That person was able to go and pick her up. Then I knew she was safe. I felt better. She ended up being taken to the police.
I have a lot of mixed feelings about Dan Schneider and Amanda Bynes' connection. There's a lot of things there. There's a lot of things there. When we do the Quiet on Set review, we'll talk about that a little more. I have no idea whether that story is true or not. However, the Amanda and Dan being involved in Amanda's emancipation was very common, was something that was out there in the public back in 2004. There was an article that has been deleted from the internet completely. And I wonder why. Because there was a lot of speculation around Amanda and Dan's connection. It's good that we're hearing Dan's side of the story, but I would like to hear Amanda's as well, which I don't know if we're gonna ever get, truthfully. But there is a lot of speculation with that are just rumors about Amanda like living with Dan at some point that we're speculating around, but this paints it a little differently. She could have very well lived with Dan to get away from her father, because as you know, Amanda's father, not the easiest person out there, not the easiest person to deal with. So I could see Amanda trying to get away, but there might be consequences with that. There was consequences with that, and it was interesting in the doc when Dan got involved in that, the emancipation. That's where his relationship with Amanda ended, and because Amanda's parents didn't like Dan, which was very interesting to me as well. But it's interesting hearing him talking about this openly. I feel as well he says this story because it paints him in a good light to show that he's very caring. What I've noticed, and with what has been said, is that his favorites seem to have a really good experience until it's no longer a good experience. Like Katrina Johnson said, he was my mentor until he wasn't, until Amanda came in, and then she was kicked to the curb. But with the secondary actors, like majority of these people in this documentary, Alexa Nicholas, Brian Hearns, Giovanni Samuels, Raquel Lee, he discarded them. When Raquel Lee had a big cake for her birthday, who she wanted to share with the entire crew, not just herself, Dan lost himself. Like, he lost it on everyone because she had too big of a cake. Like, what's the big deal about a cake? Because he didn't want the cake to look bigger than Amanda's cake that she probably got for her birthday, and it was probably the biggest one. And he was losing it because it's like, why is her cake that big? And I'm like, he really likes to display that his shows are a casting couch, and that he really likes to show hierarchy of who he favors. Notice how he never mentions, not once, any of these people's names. Only his favorites' names gets mentioned, the ones he really cares about, right? Let's keep going.
Well, regardless of what some people may think, I think it's only positive that you are there for people when they need you. That said, let's talk about some of the things that have just been swirling forever.
Okay.
You were banned from your set.
Never happened. That is a false rumor.
What happened?
Add it to the list of false rumors.
Talk to me, what happened?
They were adult actresses at the time, and they had their own specific reasons for not wanting to do the show anymore. I'm not judging that. It got tense, and what they don't know, maybe, is I did everything I could to make that show go away. My producer partner at the time, we would call and say, this is not a good situation.
Okay.
So I decided I'm going to do what most showrunners do, which is, you're not on the set. There's a director there to shoot it. I'll go up to the writer's room. I'll work on the next script. But because everybody was so used to me caring about every detail of every show so much, for me not to be on the set, maybe some people thought I got banned.
So it was more of an assumption because this guy's usually here and now he's not.
I don't know if it was an assumption. I don't know if somebody thought they were making me look bad by saying I got banned from the set. I have no idea.
Okay.
All I know is I was never banned from the set.
See, this goes to show me that he has so much ego and pride that he doesn't want to just, like, own it. Like, if he was banned from the set from causing so many, like, outbursts and stuff, he should just say it. He should really just say it. But, you know, he's denying it here. So it's a he said, she said sort of situation. But there's a lot of documentation saying that he was banned from the set, a.k.a. Jeanette McCurdy's book. And, you know, he's like, I want to know what his list of false rumors are. I'm actually very curious what his false rumors are, because I feel like we're not even scratching the surface here. I really don't. Yeah.
Yep. The darkest part of this series discussed child predators. Now, I want to make sure that we clear a couple of things up.
Okay.
Brian Peck was not hired by you.
No, I did not hire Brian Peck.
This was a Tolan Robbins production?
Yeah. And when Drake and I talked and he told me what had happened, I was more devastated by that than anything that ever happened to me in my career thus far. And I told him, I'm here for you. What do you need? Which Drake mentioned in the show that we watched last night. And next, I heard that he went to court when this guy was being tried, Peck. And when Drake walked in, he saw 50 people sitting on the side of the courtroom supporting Peck. A lot of them pretty famous. Of course, Drake was devastated that that happened. And even more disappointing, 41 of those people wrote letters for Peck, character letters, praising him for who he was and asking for leniency, and they knew that he was guilty. They knew he had confessed to some degree, and they still did this. That's baffling that adults would do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's baffling because, again, it's first off, there's a lot of half truths here because Tolan Robbins' production is, I think, Mike Tolan and Brian Robbins' production company. Dan isn't the head of that necessarily. He does have a part. He's part of it, but it eventually becomes him, and he has his own production company, Schneiders Bakery, but he may have not been the one that suggested Brian Peck, but he could have given the okay for Brian Peck, because why was he Pickle Boy? Why was he on the Amanda Show and all that and all this and that, you know? Why was he there? But also something to keep in mind, and I just have to keep it 100 here with you guys, is that at the time, this was before internet, really. Well, internet was around, but there weren't many rumors out there. Who knows, there could have been rumors through word of mouth, through Hollywood about Brian Peck. I don't know. I wasn't there. But in that time period, it was harder to do background checks on people. And at the time, he wasn't a registered sex offender. So we do have to keep that in mind. He did have a clean record prior, but doesn't mean he didn't do anything prior. Because I think some of those people that wrote letters, something happened with him and those people that wrote letters defending Brian Peck. I think that's the truth of that, but allegedly, of course. So I do have to say that.
I don't know if people know this, but Drake's mom, a lovely woman who I stay in contact with this day, she came to me at the time and she said, Dan, I'm not good with words like you are. And would you help me with my speech for the judge? And I said, of course. And I did. And he ended up going to prison and serving his time. And yeah, that was probably the darkest part of my career.
My question, though, with that, based off what Drake said, Dan, why did you ask if it was him? And why did you say to Drake, am I involved somehow? Like that's just curious to me. Like, I do think there's one foot on one side where I'm like, okay, Dan could be being very sympathetic, but then there's that other side where it's like, what's the underlying implication of this? What do you know, Dan? What do you know about Brian? And why are you asking if you have anything to do with this? That's just a thought. That's just a thought that comes to mind. That's all.
And here's the kicker that I really don't get. After he got out of prison and was, to my knowledge, a registered sex offender, he was hired on a Disney Channel show. I don't understand that.
I do have to agree with him on that, actually. I do have to agree. Like, why was he hired on a Disney show? Because, but also I think in his mind, he's like, it could be like, why would you ruin your reputation like that by hiring a sex offender? Because it's no knowledge at that point, which is crazy. That is just crazy. But all of this is crazy.
I don't understand.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, man. Are you okay? You want to take a minute?
Yeah, I'm all right. Let's keep going.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we really unpacked some important things. We set the record straight on a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Before I let you get out of here, I appreciate the vulnerability that you use in knowing that there's definitely things that you would have and should have done differently. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that we haven't discussed? Anything that if you could go back and navigate the journey differently, what would that look like?
Yeah, there's definitely things that I would do differently. One, that I think would be really, really important is when you're hiring young actors, minors, to work in television, I would suggest that we have a licensed therapist there to...
That actually would be a good thing. That is something that all jobs should really have, to be quite honest with you, is a therapist, but especially for child actors, because there are so many child actors that are damaged afterwards, and that's why we see a lot of problems of them developing later in life, like Amanda Bynes. I can, okay.
oversee that process for the specific reason of making sure that those kids really wanted to do this job, that they really wanted to be on television. Yeah. Maybe they should even be informed about what that means. What's it going to mean if you're famous? What's that going to mean on social media? What's it going to mean within your family? Right. Let them find out. And then that way, if a kid doesn't want to be on a TV show, they can opt out. Yeah. That psychologist, that therapist could come to us and say, this kid doesn't want to do it, or their parents aren't understanding of what's going to come. And then we could avoid the mistake of ever putting a kid in a TV show that didn't want to be there. And additionally, the main thing that I would change is how I treat people and everyone. I definitely at times didn't give people the best of me. I didn't show enough patience. I could be cocky and definitely overambitious, and sometimes just straight up rude and obnoxious, and I am so sorry that I ever was.
And you're just, but also you're like yelling at children. Like you literally yell at children on your sets. Like that is scary. I for one, am not good with yelling. Like when someone yells at me, I'm already 500% done with you. And especially if I was a kid and getting yelled at, I would have lost it. Well, there are times I've done certain jobs in my life where I was getting yelled at and I lost it. But I had to internally do that, but the aftermath of that ain't good. It ain't ever good. Interesting.
And all right, when I watched the show, I could see the hurt in some people's eyes, and it made me feel awful and regretful. And
which people? Don't just say some people. Be specific about who those people you hurt are and who you feel you hurt. As far as I'm concerned, you owe everyone an apology as a start, but there's a work to be done there. There is work to be done to break the cycle here. It's very clear. It's very clear. Dan, you still have a lot of work to be done.
Sorry. I wish I could go back, especially to those earlier years of my career, and bring the growth and the experience that I have now and just do a better job and never, ever feel like it was okay to be an asshole to anyone, ever. Look, I wanted to make funny TV shows for kids, and we definitely did that. But if I could go back, I would get it done in different ways. I'd just be nicer as often as possible and listen more to the people on my team. And I would do everything that I could to make sure that everyone had a good experience. That's what I do differently.
Dan, I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you.
Thanks for stopping by, man.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was us reacting to the Dan Schneider video. The takeaways from this, I feel like, after watching it, is that there were a lot of moments where I was like, there was one step, he had his foot one step in and then one step out. And the thing with that, when that's the case, it just looks like a PR stunt. Like this just looks like he he just wrote this entire script himself. It feels very scripted. If he was truly sorry, it wouldn't be with an actor he hired from one of his shows. He would have done this interview on Quiet on Set. Why wasn't he in Quiet on Set then? Because he never thought Quiet on Set would make it to air? I'm generally curious. Or why doesn't he go on like GMA, The View, any like news show really, like any of them, and just have an interview? This was nothing. This was just nothing. It just was him conducting with his lawyers with pre-written responses and answers, and he had to act them out. He was really playing up his acting skills here. And he only apologized because he got caught. But that wasn't really much of an apology, because he didn't specify on what he was specifically sorry for. He didn't, because there was no specifics really talked about. It was all very general and surface level. If you're going to give an apology, be very specific about who you feel you hurt. And he just gave like an industry standard apology. But this topic is much deeper than that. This is dealing with children here. That's why this is not coming off as genuine, because he should have done this like years ago. But he never did. And now that he doesn't have a platform anymore, he has no choice but to face his past actions now and the consequences of that. And I feel we are just at the tip of the iceberg with that, truthfully. I feel Jeanette McCurdy's, well, not even that. There was a lot of things prior to that I've been following for almost a decade now. But Jeanette McCurdy's book and Alexa Nicholas advocating for a lot of this too, and a lot of the YouTubers talking about this, are the catalysts for why this documentary came, and this documentary is going to perpetuate it further. What do you guys think about this response? What do you think? What do you really think about this? Because I feel I got warped by Dan Warp. It was all over the place, and I really was like just shook by some of the stuff he was saying, like shook, and not in the best way possible. I was like, you're still not showing true remorse, because you don't know what you're truthfully sorry for. Like, I feel he's missing the picture about a lot of this, and there's only questions in there that were very surface. It was very softball interview, very softball. And an actor, having hired an actor to ask your questions who's not an interviewer, that just makes it so much worse. And hiring a black token actor, which I'm not surprised he did. This looks like, remember when Sharon Osbourne got fired from The Talk and she went on Entertainment Tonight with the black entertainment reporter? Remember that? It's giving that. Whenever a white person gets called racist, they have to really put their black token interviewer in there to be like, look, I have a black friend, so I can't be racist. Right. Okay, so that's all I have to say about this for now. I might have more to add later, but we can talk about that later. I just want to thank you guys so much for being here, and just, we need to continue having the conversation, and I really think we will keep having it on Twitter, on YouTube, on Patreon, everything, and I hope you all have a blessed day.